So I cut out the F-hole shape from my tracing, and I'm going to stick it on here to my template just so I can see where the F-hole is. I want to avoid being able to see the wires through the F-hole. So I'm going to be running the wires predominantly around this side of the circuit, not over here because that would be visible straight through. You don't want to see a jumble of spaghetti through the F-hole. Also, I'm going to be using about a length of this shrink wrap tubing, 3/16 inch. It was only a little over $1 for 4 feet of it. I'm just going to be using it as a nice black tube to run the wires inside. So looking at this a little bit further, the 3 volume pots, neck, bridge, and middle, all run around to this 3-position switch. So I don't want to run the wires directly across the F-hole. I want to run them around like this so they won't be visible through the F-hole. And as I'm choosing my lengths of wire, I just want to make sure that I leave myself enough extra slack so that we'll have space to run it through the tubes and for stripping without coming up short. Now these are the 3 wires that run from the volume pots over to the 3-way switch, and I'm going to feed them through a length of the shrink wrap tubing to keep them organized. You can see that at one end I've tied together the braided shields of all 3 wires. I've also attached on a longer blue wire that I'm going to use to reach over to the ground lug of the switch. You could just strip off a really long section of the braided shield so that you can reach over to the ground lug, but I chose to attach this blue wire here. So that reaches to the ground lug, and on the other side of the switch, the 3 signal wires connect to the 3 positions of the switch. So looking at our wire placement again, this is the bundle of wires that comes from the switch out to the 3 volume pots, and I'm adding another tube here through which I'm going to put the tone wire that goes from the middle of the tone, and that'll keep those organized separately. The reason for the 2 different pieces of tubing is so that in the middle here some wires can come out and connect where they need to connect. So next up I'm going to solder this wire here from the middle volume knob over to the tone pot, and then we'll solder up the wires that run over to the switch. Now I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. This is the middle volume pot, and I've already connected a wire to one lug over to the tone pot, and I need to add a wire here to run over to the switch through the very same lug. So what I need to do here is hold the wire with a pair of needle nose pliers because it's going to get real hot. And I'm going to heat that lug until the solder melts, and then I'm just going to feed this second wire through to join with the first and hold it until it dries. Now for the braided shield, first just add another blob of solder to your soldering iron. And this can be a little bit tricky. There's an existing wires shield already soldered to the back of the pot, and as we heat the pot, the existing wire will tend to lift away. So I'm going to be using my needle nose pliers here as a hold down and just wait for the solder to melt, and then it'll all start fusing together, and I'll hold it with the needle nose pliers until it solidifies and dries into a nice shiny surface. Then I'll just give it a little tug here to make sure it's a good connection. And I'm going to go and wire up the other 2 volume pots, and when I come back we'll take a look at the switch. Now when I was running the wires through the tubes, I lost track of which wire was coming from each volume pot, so I'm going to use my multimeter in continuity mode, which simply means it beeps like this when I make a connection. And I'm going to put my probe on the neck volume pot and touch each of the wires until it beeps. And that's the one. So this wire right here is coming from the neck volume pot. And I'll do the same for the others to identify which are which. So for the neck one, now it's got to refer back to my original circuit diagram to remember which position of the switch it goes on, and it goes on to the right lug of the switch. Okay, so that's neck. So this one is going to connect over to this lug. Put a little bend in it. There we go. That's better. Now since I've already tinned the lug of the switch and the wire with a good amount of solder, I just need to heat these up until they melt together. And then just hold it in place till it dries. Next up will be to do the other 2 lugs of the switch to the other volume pots, and then I'll move on to the tone cap.